A Boy and His Dream. This is a story about logic and reality and a dream. It's also about my little brother, who was about 5.5 at the time. I was a full 7 3/4 and quite full of wisdom of all kinds. I'm not going to tell you my brother's name. I don't want to say anything here that might tip off his current board of directors to reconfigure his stock option plan. It all started with a piano. The two of us considered the monstrous 88-keyed instrument with some trepidation. Its purpose had not yet been made entirely clear to us. We were suspicious. However, that concern did not apply to the gigantic box the juggernautical item came in. A sturdy rectangular cardboard covering of immense proportions. A massive, movable, impregnable military fort on the face of it. We made sure it was properly conveyed downstairs to the floor of the garage in good order. Not all parents are preternaturally stupid, after all. Even ours could see that this was a priceless opportunity that should not be carried back in the truck with the delivery guys. We caroused in the box for a few days, dragged it out in the yard, dragged it back in out of the rain, even slept in it with repurposed or redirected bedding. The box was a momentous gift. We reenacted everything from Fort Apache to the beaches of Normandy in that thing. One day, after the novelty had worn off a bit, I was walking down the back steps and I heard an unusual sawing-like sound coming from the garage underneath the crack of the partially closed door. I slunk to the side wall, taking the usual precautions not to be observed, and crouched down to see my brother, let's call him Davy, intently engaged in some sort of destruction operation on the big box. He had cut a section of one of the sides off the fort and laid it flat on the floor, and was now slicing an irregular hypotenuse line to opposite corners with a pair of long red-handled pruning shears we used to have in the shop. As I peered around the corner at knee height, I could see him sizing up his work. A triangle, a good straight 6 feet on the long side, another 2 feet at a right angle, and the long, irregularly pruned side arriving at a point at the far end. A triangle, basically. My first thought was that this was wanton destruction of our amazing plaything. Secondly, though, Davy had been known to come up with some pretty interesting ideas. Maybe this was one of them. What the hell was he up to? I saw him throw down the opposite large cardboard rectangle onto the floor and cast the newly minted long pointed triangle down on top of it, and then trace the hypotenuse side with a sharp blade. The obvious intent was to trace out a double. At this point, I decided to withdraw out of due consideration for the lad's privacy. I would find out what he was up to in due time. No need to indulge in some kind of big brother assertion of power or interference. At least not yet. I moved along. A few days later, I was returning from a hickory nut fight down the street with some of the older kids when I saw a small group of younger kids down by the big white oak in our backyard. That tree was a center of action of the neighborhood. It was maybe 80 or 90 feet tall with a good 2.5 feet in diameter at the base, supporting a fork with two lofty vertical columns. We had attached a rope swing to a high limb and rigged up a way to swing completely around the tree and back in a wide arc, returning with our feet against the trunk to virtually the same place, whether going clockwise or counter. With this rig, we were able to attain considerable altitude and angular momentum while whirling back and forth around the tree. The only reason I'm mentioning this is to show how much inventiveness and daring were a part of the boyhood culture around there back in those days. Of course, the average rope swing of that day was a pitiful shadow of our own daring circus ride. Anyway, the kids were sort of mingling around the tree like they were waiting for something. Mostly younger kids, 4, 5, 6 years old, like that. I heard our garage door open and looked back to see Davy come marching down through the backyard, dragging some kind of load that looked like the cardboard on a rope behind him. He was wearing the seersucker shorts that all little kids seem to have been supplied with back in the day, and, most unusual, had on a kind of cocky Robin Hood cap that I had never seen before. He clearly saw me, but marched ceremoniously past without any recognition. I'm not sure I had ever seen little Davy like this before. The kids at the tree spread out in a semicircle at Davy's approach. No words were spoken. I sort of angled on down there without actually joining the group of youngers than me. I now began to see a little bit of what was going on. The kids had clearly been alerted to that effect. I saw a rope hanging down from the horizontal branch, reaching out from the trunk of the big white oak V. Only the big kids had the grip and arm strength to climb that rope up to the limb. Some of us had got up there to where we had nailed a couple of boards for a modest treehouse. We all knew that the branch, about 12, 13 feet up, was well strong enough to support a kid or two without drooping. Davy tied his drag rope onto the rope hanging from the limb. It was then that I realized for sure that the cardboard that Davy had been dragging was in fact the two triangular pieces that he had cut out of the piano box. He then went around behind the main trunk and quickly ascended the away trunk of the white oak V, using as hand grips and foot braces the projecting boles where old limbs had broken off and healed over. None of us had ever thought it was possible to climb the main trunk by grabbing those boles with hands and then somehow getting high enough with enough momentum to use feet to keep on going up. The key to it was apparently the speed with which it was done. The speed and the confidence. Think Yosemite Sam up the mast of his schooner on a mission of certainty. We were all amazed to be shown that it was routinely possible to get up to the horizontal limb via the main trunk. I have to confess I felt a certain pride in seeing my little brother ascend with such complete arboreal mastery. He had clearly been perfecting this. But I still didn't have a clear understanding what was afoot, so to speak. Davy hauled up the 2 pieces of cardboard and unlooped them with yet another surprising feat of knot mastery. And in a blur of sequenced motions, as us older kids came to understand that the 2 cardboard triangles were in fact wings, he inserted his arms into the corrugated hollowed areas between the smooth surfaces of said wings, rose to full height, laid the wings out horizontal, and stepped into space. His arms and the wings went immediately vertical, and he slammed to the ground instantly and immediately, directly 12 feet below the limb. My recollection is that he didn't even fall down when he landed. I can still hear clearly his statement at that time. It was, "I really thought that would work." He also said, "My feet sting." In later years, I asked him if he had planned to glide to the ground or soar somehow on some kind of a summer day updraft. Even decades later, he was able to reply, "I thought I would flap up above the houses." I think that somewhere deep down, he actually still believes that.